All right, welcome back, everybody. I'd like to welcome our next guest, Sanjay Saraf, CTO of YapStone. And Sanjay's going to tell us about how YapStone's taking advantage of microservices. So take it away, Sanjay.
Right. Thank you so much. So just before I quickly get started, I just want to give you a quick intro on myself. Again, CTO at YapStone. I'll talk a little bit about who is YapStone. YapStone is a payments company. We are basically serving global marketplaces in doing a lot of the payment processing. And as you know, fintech is a pretty fast-growing, fast-evolving space. YapStone has been doing payment processing for various different industry verticals in the past. And over the past 3 to 4 years, we've really got a fast growth trajectory more around the whole evolution of all the different shared economy platforms such as Airbnb, Uber, et cetera, that are coming up. YapStone is basically doing a lot of the behind-the-scenes payment processing. What sets YapStone a little bit different, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that, from a lot of the payment processors. Payment processors have been around for a while. A lot of them were focused primarily on e-commerce, which meant the main action that was done is either a card or some other form of payment is processed, and that payment processing is completed by the payment processors. What's different about the shared economy and what YapStone does to enable that is, in a shared economy, it's anonymous sellers and anonymous buyers coming together. And we not only support that core action of doing the payment processing, but we also enable how to bring those anonymous sellers and buyers onto the platform. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. Quick background on myself. I joined the company about a year and a half ago. Before that, I was the CTO at Western Union. I helped build Western Union's digital ecosystem in San Francisco. The company's headquartered in Denver, but I opened a brand new office for Western Union in building out mobile apps and doing a bunch of stuff around digital in terms of money transfer across 200 countries. And before that, I spent about 12 plus years at Symantec in various different roles. And currently, I also serve on the board of a semiconductor company, Rambus, if some of you are familiar with them. So that's a quick background. So just again, quickly, YapStone, we basically power global marketplaces. And the second thing is we also focus on industry verticals. That's an overall philosophy we've had in the company, that we are not only providing a solution to a specific ecosystem, but we go really deep versus providing a generic set of payment APIs or fraud and risk APIs. We actually go deep into that industry vertical and really tailor our solution for an industry vertical. So that's a chosen approach we have taken to differentiate ourselves and provide value to that specific customer base so that our solution is really, really tailored to that ecosystem. In particular, around global marketplaces, we're a very leading payments provider, primarily in the vacation rent. And if I can relate that to Airbnb or HomeAway, Expedia, if you ever booked a vacation rental in, let's say, in Tahoe for your ski trip, behind the scenes, the payment processing for that stay in Tahoe is most likely done by YapStone. And that's what we've been doing for a while and doing it at a very large scale. What does that really mean? As I mentioned, so we go beyond that number 2 box, pay-in, card processing. We provide that whole value chain of services to our customers. In this case, HomeAway, Expedia is a very large customer of ours. And so for them, we do merchant onboarding. What that means is every single property that is getting listed on HomeAway, we underwrite that property. We ensure that that property really belongs to that person who's trying to list that property. Behind the scenes, there is a huge amount of data gathering that happens to verify and validate that listing before that listing is enabled on Expedia's site. And then, yes, pay-in, which is our payment processing for any traveler that is coming onto the platform and using that platform. We do all that payment processing. And again, it's not just payment processing. Number 5 is that fraud protection. We also take care of all the fraud and it's all done in real time as a consumer is transacting with the platform. We do all the fraud management, et cetera, also with that. Number three, once we have collected that payment from the traveler, how do you actually now pay that property owner the funds that he's due for the stay? And so we also do what we call as a disbursement of funds. This is known in the industry as mass disbursement. So imagine, there are on our platform, on HomeAway's platform, right now there are many millions of properties in all parts of the world. And how do you get money out to those property owners? So we have technology where we are connected with the banking ecosystem around the world, where we can disperse those funds directly into a homeowner's bank account. So that's the dispersed property. And trust and safety is everything to do with fraud, risk, underwriting. And then also we provide our customers, the homeowners, and even our parent customers, Expedia, with fraud protection, where we take a lot of that risk on behalf of our customers. And we are using a ton of data and data analysis, risk modeling to really take care of that fraud and provide that as a fraud protection mechanism to our customers. And then also chargebacks. There are many, many complex scenarios where a traveler who goes and stays at somebody's home, the home may be listed as 2 bedrooms, 2 bath, but the guy actually comes back and says, hey, there really was a bath and a quarter. It was really not a full bath. I want a refund for portion of my stay. And how to process that transaction and still take care of both the customer and the homeowner becomes quite challenging from a money movement standpoint. And so we have solutions in place to manage that entire chargeback life cycle also for the customer. Essentially, to sum it up, then comes in this case of payment processing, at the end of the day, it's money movement, it's money transfer. And money transfer gets very, very complex because of compliance, licensing, and then also everything that you have to do around tokenization of information about PII, because this is very sensitive data. This is your payment credentials. And so how do you manage all of that and the security considerations? So that's, in a nutshell, what makes up our platform and our offering back to our customers. As you can start to see the theme that it starts becoming very complex from a data standpoint, and how you manage all of this data, and the actions have to be all real time as you're onboarding those properties or those merchants, and as you're processing transactions. So that's kind of what we do on the marketplace side. Industry verticals, we have also focused specifically on industries such as the rent payment. This is still one of the largest forms of payment that an individual does that still is very manual. There are still people, majority of the people in the US still write a check. YapStone has been automating this process for property management companies for the past many years. We are the industry leader in this space. We do about $5 billion in volume in processing those rent checks. And have digitized a big portion of that. So there's a lot of different capability we provide to the property management companies. We integrate to various different large property management softwares. Something even I was not very familiar before I joined the company. There are some very, very large companies. These are software companies, tech companies that create software for property management companies, supply chain management, vendor management for large properties. And they were not offering payments, and so YapStone went and integrated into those property management softwares and became the default choice for payments for these property management companies. So, and then also on the renter side, we provide the ability for a renter to pay their rent online in various different forms and shapes. So that's the second vertical that we have specifically been focused on. So really, just a quick snapshot of the overall company from a size and scale standpoint. We've onboarded over 1 million merchants onto the platform. We process in the last 3 to 4 years over 100 billion in volume. In any given year, we process about 18 to 20 billion in volume, and this is primarily US and Europe. We're not yet in LATAM, Asia, and many other countries. So the opportunity for us to scale outside of the US and European market is pretty enormous. but we are also already doing a very sizable business in this space. From a business perspective, strong business financial metrics. We are, like Couchbase, still in that startup category, but really well positioned. We are growing extremely fast. We have a common investor, Axel, Meritech, and then MasterCard is a very strategic investor in our company just from the fact that we are in the payments processing space. So we just raised our Series C, $100 million, and so pretty well positioned going forward. So just talk a little bit about when I joined a year ago, what were some of the technical challenges we were facing as we are growing really, really very rapidly. 20 billion in payments volume is pretty sizable, and it's growing 30% year over year. Huge growth. So some of the challenges that we had, like many companies that go through complex schema changes, our current technology, I think over the years did well, but Microsoft SQL Server based, rest of the stack is a Java stack, but very complex schema, complex and monolithic application. Everything is encapsulated in one big giant application. Time consuming for regression, monitoring, and embedding monitoring at every different layer became very difficult. Every time we do an update, we have to redeploy the whole application, and that gets very tricky. Still have to have a lot of manual testing on top of it because it's very hard to go automate this whole complex monolithic structure. And more importantly, lack of continuous development. As payments industry is moving very, very fast, there are a lot of new regulatory requirements and fraud changes that are happening on a very regular basis. Our ability to adapt to those new changes in a very, very fast and dynamic way is somewhat challenged right now. And then lastly, the database layer, vertical scalability. As I talked about, the fact that 20 billion in volume, millions and millions of almost 30 million in transaction volume, which right now is high dollar tickets. That's the vertical we play in. As we start to go into other verticals such as rideshare, the dollar value starts to go down. The transaction TPS will dramatically increase. And so that's going to put a heavy burden on us from a database scalability perspective. So those were some of the high-level challenges that we definitely were experiencing. And to some degree, we've been able to mitigate some of this by some short-term fixes. But we are clearly seeing the potential that we have from a growth perspective. So we wanted to really get ahead of the curve and start addressing that. So from a vision perspective, we put some high-level things in place. So the first and foremost was we wanted to go down the path of a microservices decoupled components. So that was tenet number one. Second, modular architecture. Now, both microservices and modular architecture kind of are maybe slightly different nuances of a similar approach, but there are some differences that both of those approaches bring, and we wanted to have that as part of our overall architecture. A payments company has to be global. Our customers are global, so we need to be global. So that was our third key thing, that our platform needs to be global for many, many purposes. One simple example of a global need is not just being able to process transactions in various different countries, but countries like Turkey require data residency within the country. Russia requires data residency within the country. So there's a lot of complexity that comes from data residency requirements. GDPR is a new regulation that has come out in Europe that puts additional burden on how you design your application, how you manage payment credentials and PII data. So having that global thought process and design and architecture was super critical for us. And also our platform is multi-tenant, which means our platform serves many, many customers. It can serve Uber, Lyft at the same time as it's serving Expedia or Airbnb or others down the road. So having an ability to really be multi-tenant was also extremely critical for us. Independent scalability, ability to scale any one or combination of microservices on the fly was super important. And then this is given at this stage in everybody's ecosystem, continuous deployment. In a payments ecosystem, we have to have the ability to deploy continuously and in a highly automated DevOps manner. And so we definitely had to have that as a key requirement. And then finally, this prior session, I know there was a very active discussion around active setup. And as we are global, this was probably one of the main requirements that we had when we were looking specifically around the database selection with Couchbase. So these were kind of some of the key high-level tenets that we had going into our new microservices-based architecture. What we did really was we took that, and this is more of a business view of that those microservices. So as I indicated, our core of the platform is merchant onboarding, and that's where we are onboarding our partners. We're onboarding the sub-merchants. These are the millions of homeowners or millions of car owners that we would be onboarding onto the platform, and how we onboard them in a mechanism that makes it easy for those customers to get onboarded onto the platform. Our pay-in platform is, again, the platform that allows us to process a payment from an end consumer. And we had to have the ability to support all kinds of payment methods. In the US, we are all used to card payments. Outside of the US, cards are not as common. It's known as alternate payment methods when you go outside of the US. So we had to have the ability to support those alternate payment methods. Best example of an APM is Alipay or WeChat Pay. Those are alternate payment methods. When you go to even Europe, that is the Western world, people don't use cards. In Germany, they use something called Sofort. In Netherlands, they use something called Ideal. And these are all various different electronic forms of payment methods. And they're very connected to the banking ecosystem in these countries. These countries are very risk aware from a card usage perspective. They'd like to use payments directly that pull funds directly from their bank accounts. So those are all the different alternate payment methods. And then payout is like, how do you pay out money onto people's bank accounts, onto debit cards and wallets that are very common in countries like Kenya and many other countries. And then all the value-added services that we provide, such as fraud immunity, chargeback management, and then also what we are in the process of creating is micro-lending. So if you're booking a vacation, it's your honeymoon, you're booking a vacation, it's $8,000, how do we instantly give you a micro-loan for that trip, and so that you're able to actually process that transaction, and we make that decision based on data, like how are we going to create that type of a lending scenario, and then the underlying the platform is really our trust and safety system, very data intensive, global settlement, doing currency management in multiple currencies, 130 plus currencies. And then the finance systems and global customer support. So when we look at this business view, think of each of these areas becoming a microservice. And at the end, I'll talk about why we had value in going down this path, not just from a technical perspective, but also from a business perspective. Each of these microservices gives us now the ability to go to market and sell only that microservice. In the past, it was one size fits all, the whole platform. With this microservices approach, this is the business view of that, we have the ability to go sell those specific microservices based on the needs. Example, Uber may have already got everything on the payment side. They have the payment processing, they build their own payment gateway, but they may not have onboarding capability to the extent that we have, so we could possibly sell them just the onboarding capability. So that's an example of why we went down the microservices path. The team did a pretty exhaustive analysis around the database. As I mentioned, we were on a SQL Server ecosystem, had lots of challenges. One big challenge, definitely, that was very well related to the prior session was around replication, data replication. We were going to be in multiple geographies. Doing data replication with Microsoft is, let's say, challenging. I'll leave it at that. These were other reasons why we had to go with a different approach from a database perspective. So segmentation and partition, having the ability to persist data, have more in-memory type of an application use of the data, specifically for fraud and risk management, which is very data intensive. Internally, from the processes, we are generating a very small sliver of data, but we integrate to roughly 60 to 70 different external data providers from which we source data. One example of that data would be things like a device ID and verifying that device ID. Does this device really belong to you? And so we source that data from various different third parties, or your social profile or your social graph. We're sourcing some of that data from third parties, and then doing a lot of the data processing based on that for either onboarding purposes or for the fraud management. Second was really the document storage and access. We definitely needed something that gave us the ability for distributed caching. Our data types and data formats are very, very different in various parts of our overall platform. So we needed the ability for us to have the ability to process both structured JSON type of structures, semi-structured, unstructured. Literally had to have the ability, not just in an analytics ecosystem, but in the transactional ecosystem, the ability to manage various different data structures. And then dynamic schema changes. And this is where the best example of why we needed a dynamic schema change is for legal and compliance perspective. The laws change very frequently. And so there's constant changes happening in the law where they say, hey, in addition to first name, last name, we also need to have the SSN captured. So in the past, we would have to go make very intrusive changes to the database. Now we just go into the JSON object, add another attribute, and we're able to spin that change and introduce that change pretty fast. And then across the different domains related back to the various different microservices that we created, there was trust and safety, which is everything to do with fraud management, underwriting, payment transaction lifecycle that has completely different data sets, that is pricing, that is order transactions, managing the chargebacks and all the data related to chargebacks, refunds, and cancellations. So that's the other area. And then settlements and analytics was kind of to wrap it up. I pretty much spoke about this. This is our first major use case with using Couchbase as the foundation of one of our key microservices, which is around trust and safety. Again, scalable architecture for the very data type that I talked about significantly simplifies and gives us flexibility to store JSON objects in various different formats. And also the most important piece was XDCR, the data replication capability, as we are deployed both in multiple zones within the US on AWS and multiple zones in Europe. And soon we're going to go out to Asia Pacific. And so to have that ability to have data replication with very, very minimal latency was something that we're definitely using. And it is bidirectional replication that we are doing between Europe and the US. And also, of course, the whole rich data sets that I talked about. On that side, you can see it's the anti-money laundering data. It's KYC, which is know your customer data. OFAC. OFAC is everything to do with are you on a restricted list set by various different federal governments, such as, is this transaction coming from Iran or from North Korea? Those transactions have to be blocked. And then we look at least 70 plus different sources of data, device data, how many apps do you have installed on your phone, all of those data. Yeah, I know, you kind of, but every vector, every velocity of that data computes to a score, a risk score, and that's what is all used in split-second decisioning on a transaction. Another big use case which differentiates and something we do very unique in the industry, especially in the vacation rental, is if you are a homeowner and somebody rents your property and makes the reservation in June, but the stay is in December, we pay the homeowner in June, which means YapStone takes a lot of that risk based on a lot of the data where we upfront pay that customer, that homeowner for that stay even before the stay has happened. Something Airbnb's been trying to do for the past several months, and it's not easy. And it's just because we've had a lot of history with data management around properties and property stays, something it's very unique to YapStone. And I know that Airbnb has been in various tech forums, they come and talk about it, and they've not been able to offer that yet broadly to their customer base. Very fast, from a cluster footprint standpoint, relatively small today, but we are looking at our journey for microservices. This is going to grow very, very fast. It's basically a 12-node cluster and XDCR enabled bidirectionally, over 15 million documents and growing. We expect this data size to go from tera to petabytes. We will definitely end up in the petabytes stage in the next couple of years. Results. So from a tech standpoint, it was really, we needed to be cloud native. We are deployed 100% on the cloud. Microservices, serverless APIs. We go to market with our APIs. Everybody integrates to our APIs. That's the primary mechanism of how we sell our product. And then security and compliance. And really, Couchbase is one of the key foundational technologies. Along with others, almost all of our microservices are leveraging Couchbase in some form or shape. But whether it's a shared bucket use or a dedicated, it's based on some of the specifics that we have behind the scenes. We're making that decision from an architecture perspective. And then also just from a results perspective, we've really gone from a vertical one-size-fits-all solution now to have the ability to really go and have still a global platform, but really I can now go to market with my sales organization, sell any one or really a combination of these products. So has given us a very unique and a very competitive way to go to market in a very, very diverse way. And so it gives us the option to monetize the platform significantly more than what we can do today. So that was a quick rundown on our journey. So I know our time is up.
Next session, so I urge anybody that has questions, please stop and harass Sanjay.
No worries.
Get some good conversation going. I'm sure he's got plenty of advice. Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.